Universal Disclosure Podcast welcomes Brother Gregory.
My mother was a big fan of UFOs. I was always interested in it, as I'm interested in all kinds of topics.
Being a sheep herder, I'm wondering if you've ever had or heard of anything like this. Like, have you ever heard of the cattle mutilations that have occurred?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I have a grandson who is a deputy in Nevada, and he has seen them many, many, many times. And they come on them. There's no tracks. It's like they dropped out of the sky. There's no blood. Animals won't go near them. Probably a question you would ask, have I ever seen a UFO? And of course, a UFO is an unidentified flying object, and I've seen a lot of flying objects I didn't identify. But we did see some strange things out here on the desert. They flew over with the B-52s for refueling, back when we always had B-52s in the air, and so we'd always see that they'd be doing that with their landing lights on in the middle of the night, so you'd see these glowing objects up there, but it's them refueling. But one time I saw and flew across the desert at remarkable speeds, and jets dropped down to chase it. It seemed to be that the military was in on the deal, because they were chasing it around the desert. So I always believed that there was something to it. This is the way I was raised, but since then, we've had plenty of our own experiences. Well, that's somebody not from terra firma, somewhere else. It doesn't mean they're necessarily from Alpha Centauri. You've heard maybe it's another dimension. Maybe, it could be all kinds of things. So what does all these mean? Is it spiritual? Michael Knowles, who is a respectable, intelligent fellow, thinks that all aliens are demons. And that doesn't really make sense if we go back in history, because if all aliens are demons, where are the good angels? Prophets going up to heaven in fiery chariots. And of course, the artist draws a picture of horses and a chariot on fire, but that's our projection as to what they're looking at. So everything out there in the universe is not benevolent. Be careful what you get on board with. And this is really where we start. How do you know who the good guys are and the bad guys? In real life, they don't wear white hats and black hats. Just 200 years ago, in Webster's dictionary, religion was defined as the pious performance of a duty, not only to God, but to your fellow man. That's what religion was. Do I believe in aliens? No, I believe in Jesus Christ. That's what I believe in. Do I believe there are aliens? Well, maybe. A lot of evidence.
The following program is presented for general information, education and entertainment purposes only, and is not intended to be advice of any kind. The content, views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals involved. The use of information on this program is at the user's own discretion.
And welcome back, one and all, wherever and whenever you may be. This is Universal Disclosure, meeting the moment. My name is Mike, an active UAP field investigator here in Southern California, with my friend and co-host,
Reverend Stu in Melbourne, Australia.
And Reverend Stu, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited, as always, about interviewing this guest. Now, this is interesting because I know very little about Brother Gregory, but I'm quite interested to hear what he's got to say.
Likewise, I also know very little about him at this moment, but I found him on a pod matching service. Since we're sort of trying to break new ground here, quite literally, with conversations with spiritual leaders or religious leaders, whatever you want to call them, I didn't really know where to go per se. So I found this service that matches guests and podcasters, and we're a match. So it's going to be pretty interesting. He's open to the conversation. So for me, that's great. Let's see where it goes. Where it goes, nobody knows at this point.
All right, that sounds on point. I think we're going to have some good questions for him, and we'll just see where it goes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Universal Disclosure Podcast welcomes Brother Gregory. Brother Gregory, thank you so much for joining us here. We definitely appreciate your time.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so you and I, and Stuart, we actually, you're the first guest that we don't really have any sort of connections with or know in advance, as it were, because of we're on a mission to speak with as many spiritual leaders as we can and get them involved in this topic. And we met through this matching service. So if you could give us a little bit of history as to who you are and what your path was, that would be great.
Well, my path started 3/4 of a century ago when I started, and it was back in 48 is when I was born. So in some ways, I'm older than the nation of Israel is today. So I had a spiritual insight into things, but of course, as usual, we don't always realize that it's a spiritual insight that we're dealing with. It's just feelings and perceptions. You're growing at different stages, so you see different things at different times. But I had one thing I mention a lot of times is what I call Kodak moments, where something occurs in my life, somebody says something, I meet somebody, I see something, and I know it's important, and it becomes etched in my mind like a photograph almost. And I can go back to that and see everything where people are standing and all this kind of stuff. And it might be 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60, 70 years before I understand what the significance of that thing was. But it's, I always wanted to know the truth of what was going on. My folks were religious, Roman Catholic. Well, my father was Roman Catholic. My mother was a granddaughter of a Baptist minister from Norway. And, but she converted to Catholicism because that's what you did in those days if you wanted to marry a Catholic. My mother was a big fan of UFOs. I was always interested in it, as I'm interested in all kinds of topics, from archaeology to history to the Bible to what have you. But when I was about 12, 13, I believed that I had a calling to the ministry, and the only church I knew was the Roman Church. So I ended up going to a Roman Catholic seminary. It was a missionary priest that I was studying to be, directly under the auspices of the Pope. And California, ended up being in California. The order that it was actually more of a society. And I ended up attending St. Joseph's College from about 13 to 14, 15. And then met a number of people that I consider to be some of the most spiritual people I've ever met in my whole life. They had been captured by communist Chinese and tortured, and their faith had to be more than simply superficial in order to get them through some of their trials and tribulations. And but anyway, I'm not really a Roman Catholic anymore. I'm a Catholic that went a Roman. And what I've done is because I had the background in Greek and Latin and learned a lot of Hebrew over the years, a number of years ago, I ended up out in the high desert, which is a whole story in itself. And I was herding sheep and thought, and I was married, had children, had everything that I ever wanted, but I still felt unsatisfied and was wondering, what is it that that I'm missing? Where's this thing that I've been looking for? And I didn't feel like I had really found it yet. And I finally knelt down out on the desert in the dark and just said, and I hadn't done a lot of kneeling since the seminary, but I said, I don't get it. There's something I need to know and I can't figure it out, and you have to show me. And that's a pretty simple little story, but that's a very profound thing. That we got into trouble originally because we were eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We were going to decide for ourselves what was right, what was wrong, what was true, what was false. And that's a vain place to come from. And vanity and serving God do not fit well together, which is one of the reasons why I don't wear the Roman collar. So, because it sets you apart from the other people, and maybe psychologically, emotionally, it'll put you up on a pedestal. I don't want to be there. I want to serve God in what capacity he meant me to serve in. And so I have to be humble enough to see that. And that's been what I've been looking for the last 3/4 of a century, trying to find out what that is. And it's led me down a lot of paths. But I'm a firm believer that God is trying to show you stuff all the time. And we just have to be peaceful enough, still enough, forgiving enough, virtuous enough to hear what God is trying to tell us. I think God is shouting at everybody, and at best it comes through to us as a still small voice. And we can get into that more as we go, but that's kind of my beginning. But I'll tell you also, you talk about young, and my father was a lawyer, an attorney, and my grandfather was a doctor, and they wanted me to be something professional. And my dad took me into his study and showed me all these interesting things about a case he was working on that had FBI agents and firemen and intrigue and criminals and all this stuff. And afterwards, he asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. Well, at 7, you haven't done a lot of contemplating on your career. So I had to turn, and I did this all my life. I didn't understand what it was all about until I still don't understand what it's all about, but I've gotten a better idea in the last 25 years. As I turned to the side and I kind of asked in my mind, so what's the answer to that question? I didn't know. I didn't have a way. I was pretty precocious as a child. And I asked, and the answer came back, and I related it to my dad just as casual as you can be, and it was a sheep herder. That's what came to my mind. Never seen a sheep, didn't know any sheep herders, didn't live on a farm, but I ended up being a sheep herder out on the desert. So I think I had a better view of my future when I was 7 than when I was 17. And certainly, hopefully I'm getting a better view of it now when I'm over 70. So anyway, so that's been the story of my life, kind of, is listening to that still small voice that tells you something, and then having the courage or tenacity or the foolishness to follow that voice, rather than all the other voices out there in the world that are trying to get you to follow them.
Wow. Well,
Quite
thank you.
beautiful.
So,
I feel like the sheep herding was both metaphorical and literal in your case.
yes, yeah. David was a sheep herder, and if you're gonna help people, you're gonna need a lot of patience. And sheep are one of the domestic animals that requires a great deal of patience. And so you learn a lot of lessons. And I'm always telling people, love my stories. That's what they tell me. I suppose there's somebody that hates them, but they don't tell me. But I relate. I tell, there's a phenomena that it seems like everything that's going to happen in the future, all the pandemics and flying into buildings with airplanes and everything, it all shows up on the TV a couple of years before. And it's like it's telling us what the future is. Well, I have a thing that when I'm going through we have Bible studies, hours and hours of Bible studies on all free on our websites. Everything that I'm going to talk about happens in the field first. I'm always bringing in things that I observe when I'm out in the field back and relating it to the Bible and what's going on. And we're controversial, but we've done our homework. Every page has 40, 50, sometimes 100 footnotes so people can check out what we're saying. And we're saying something quite contrary to what most people think religion is all about today. And of course, that's not the essential part of your podcast, but we get deep into the spiritual aspect of this.
Okay, that's awesome. So I want to say a couple things real quick. First, you might see me wiping my brow a lot. We're having like the hottest day of the year here in Southern California, and I'm sweating literally. But hopefully that doesn't get too annoying.
That's
But
okay. I was out
anywho,
today and it was hot here too.
I actually forgot to ask you our main first question. So
I was wondering why you're going to get to that.
yeah, I should
I
have
have
asked you that.
pondered the answer to that since I heard that was going to be a question.
Okay, so
Back
let's
when
do that and get that out there before we get into the other stuff. What is your favorite song or musical artist?
Okay. Well, when I was 7, the first record I bought was Stan Freberg. I'm a Green Christmas, and it was a parody, on existing music. And I was fascinated because of the use of the words. I've been fascinated with words and their meanings. And the first album I bought was Alan Sherman, who was using regular music that we've all heard. You went the wrong way, King Louis, instead of a long ways from St. Louis, but same music, but different words. And so that attracted my attention when I was a young man. And of course, then in the seminary, I was listening to Gregorian chant. And then during the Vietnam era, I couldn't get no satisfaction. And then, of course, the Beatles, Hard Day's Night, all these things. Music is in the moment. And I'm often heard saying the kingdom of God is in the moment. And also, when we listen to music together with other people, or even just listen to an artist, there's no music better than a live artist. But we leak into one another through the harmony of that music. And so that, I think, is what has attracted me. So the favorite music is the one in the moment. But to be honest, I have to reveal a secret that only a few people know. The only concert I ever went to was Weird Al Yankovic's.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is back to parodies again. So I've gone back to my younger years. I just love his music, which of course is everybody else's music. A lot of times his music is better than the original artist. It's the same song, but he does it better.
Sometimes.
But it's the words that because there's messages in that, And then of course there's poetry and all that kind of stuff. So I guess I'll have to confess Weird Al Yankovic. Although the favorite music artist that I'm following, the only one I'm following now, is Marcin, who's the guitarist from Poland, I think. Young guy. Oh, wow. But he doesn't play a guitar. He works it. I mean, you watch him. He's amazing. He just goes by that one name, as far as I know.
Check him out. I'm not familiar with him.
Yeah. But he doesn't play a guitar. You can't say that's playing. But you watch him. I mean, he's almost as fun to watch as it is to listen to. But yeah, I've gone the whole gamut from jazz to Gregorian chant to Bach, Beethoven, even Tchaikovsky, and all these guys. I mean, I love music, but to give you a favorite is almost like telling you a favorite grandchild. You don't do that. It does a disservice to all the others. So, in the moment, that favorite may change. So anyway, we answered that long way around, but it gives you a little bit more insight into my thinking, I think. So.
Yeah, for sure. It's just it's a fun way to sort of open up the conversation as well, and gives us some perspective of you as a person, because we're about to talk about some really wild stuff, and
yes.
So we want to round out the conversation. I mean, on one hand, of course, I want to ask. I mean, you already said that you had an interest of UFOs. I don't know, maybe I'm jumping ahead too far, but being this might sound like a weird question, but it's a serious question. Being a sheep herder, I'm wondering if you've ever had or heard of anything like this. Like, have you ever heard of the cattle mutilations that have occurred?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I have a grandson who is a deputy in Nevada, and he has seen them many, many, many times. And they come on them. There's no tracks. It's like they dropped out of the sky. There's no blood. Animals won't go near them. He's seen a lot of stuff because he's a very lonely area in Nevada, up in the high deserts up in Nevada too. And I told him he should write a book, but yeah, I've heard of them. I haven't come across them. We've had some north of here in other valleys. We've heard of them. And, I've also come on animals that were killed or died and were eaten out by coyotes and stuff like that. And if you don't know what you're looking for, this is the problem with this subject. There's a lot of information out there that is not true or misunderstood or lies, but everything ain't swamp gas. So I think you'll catch that. That was one of the things back Colonel Keyholes and the Blue Book Project. And I read all those things. I'm an avid reader growing up once I learned to read, but I was slow to learn to read because I'm really extremely dyslexic, but it's actually turned to be a gift. It's allowed me to see things differently than other people.
Nice. Yeah, so Project Blue Book was headed up by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and ironically enough, our next episode is going to be with one of his sons, Paul Hynek. So that's going to be an interesting conversation too. So yeah, I guess I was kind of just curious. I've never heard of any sheep being like mutilated, but I was just kind of curious if maybe there was.
It's mostly I see cattle that way. Yeah. I haven't seen sheep that way or heard of sheep that way. Could be a lot of things I haven't heard of, but. Probably a question you would ask, have I ever seen a UFO? And of course, a UFO is an unidentified flying object, and I've seen a lot of flying objects I didn't identify. But we did see some strange things out here on the desert because we see a lot of night skies. I have a daughter who's an accomplished astronomical observer since she was a little kid. We used to be where they flew over with the B-52s for refueling back when we always had B-52s in the air. And so we'd always see that they'd be doing that with their landing lights on in the middle of the night. So you'd see these glowing objects up there, but it's them refueling. But one time I saw like landing lights and you could see lights underneath the big jet. It was low. It was like a B-52. And I could see all these other lights and I couldn't figure out what they were. And then finally I was able to focus on it. It was like 7 fighter jets underneath the wings of this B-52. And then suddenly something red, solid red light, not blinking, came out of the B-52 and flew across the desert at remarkable speeds, and jets dropped down to chase it. We saw this night after night on a regular basis. Whatever that red thing was, it appeared to make right angle turns. They seemed to be following it, and there was something else flying around in the sky that had no lights on it. We could see it because it would blink out stars. We have very bright night skies here where the stars are very, very visible. That's one of the things that, because there's no other cities around or lights around. And we could see something else was flying around there that would block out the stars as it went by, but it had no lights on it. We could see the big jet still going, the other jets underneath, and occasionally 2 more jets would come down. There'd be 2 lights, and they'd be trying to chase this red thing. But the red thing appeared to come out of the B-52 or whatever bomber that was. It was difficult to tell. We're looking at it at night. These are all taking place at night. And occasionally, we would be followed the next day by what appeared to be black helicopters. They're not really black, they're really dark, doing grid patterns over the desert out at a mountain called Diablo that we could see across the desert where nobody lives. And that would be doing grid patterns back and forth like it was looking for something. So we'd see that. So I don't know what the red things were. I know what all the other things were, but it seemed to be that the military was in on the deal, because they were chasing it around the desert. And they would come back the next night and do the same thing, or at least several times a week.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting.
That was 20-some years ago.
The name of the mountain, Diablo, seems significant.
Yeah, there's a lot of Diablos, but it is Diablo. And there's a lot of mysterious things around here. But that would take up more than your program to go into all those. I'm sure we can take, but that's my only experience. My mother was a big advocate of alien and flying saucers and all that stuff. But her whole family, going back to Norway, showed obvious signs of being able to perceive things at a distance that were actually occurring now. And, like my grandmother would send my uncle out to find my mom because she just had an accident out in North Dakota. And how did she know? Well, sure enough, she did drive my uncle's sports car off into a ditch back in the 30s. And she was okay, but my grandmother, she said, you had to go somewhere, or you had to do something because somebody needed your help, you'd go, and it was always the case. She knew what she was talking about. And so that we can go back in our ancestry a long ways, and on my mom's side, that was very common. So I always believed that there was something to it. This is the way I was raised, but since then, we've had plenty of our own experiences.
Jeez, that's incredible.
So that's one side of the family.
Okay.
The other side was book learners and doctors and lawyers and the such. Our name wasn't originally Williams. We changed it to Williams because our name was so unpopular. The English crown was cutting our heads off faster than we could make new ones. So there's a whole book written about the fact that we were originally Boleyns, now Williams.
Oh, wow. How interesting.
So we have my dad was a big one for going back eventually when he retired to go back and look up our family history. And we were troublemakers way back. So
now, wasn't Anne Boleyn one of the wives of Henry VIII? Am I right with that?
Yeah. There's a lot of mysterious stories about Anne Boleyn. And my family was from the Castle Warren in Ireland, County Kilkenny, my dad's side. Which is one of the castles that Anne would stop at on a regular basis. So somehow there was a connection there, but we don't know exactly what it was because you had to kind of conceal the fact that you might be related to Anne because they were cutting off her brother's head and they wanted to cut off her father's head. Everybody wanted to be a Boleyn at one time. There's another whole story behind that, but anyway, but that's all past history. We got a lot of stuff going on now that are probably more interesting. But I'm a big student of history too. And, the idea of, terminology is very important. We say things like extraterrestrial. Well, that's somebody not from terra firma, somewhere else. It doesn't mean they're necessarily from Alpha Centauri. You've heard maybe it's another dimension. Maybe, it could be all kinds of things. I mean, to some degree, you can say that Christ was an extraterrestrial because he came from heaven, so, but what does that mean? You say it and people think, oh, you're saying that he was just an alien? No, I'm saying he was who he was, but he didn't start here. So what does all these mean? Is it spiritual? Michael Knowles, who is a respectable, intelligent fellow, thinks that all aliens are demons. And that doesn't really make sense if we go back in history, because if all aliens are demons, where are the good angels that came and visited Abraham and were there at the destruction of Sodom and saved Lot, but was unable to save his wife? So who are these people? Even when Jesus was ascending into heaven, the apostles are all standing there looking up as he ascends in a cloud, whatever that means. I mean, we can see artists drawing pictures of clouds, but they called the thing they followed in the desert a cloud. And at night it glowed like a column of fire. And in the daytime, it just looked like a cloud, which is something floating in the sky. You're not going to say it looked like a flying saucer. But it came down at one point. Moses is talking to somebody, turned sideways, and Moses is talking to somebody inside the cloud. So what is the cloud? What does it actually look like? You got prophets going up to heaven in fiery chariots. And of course, the artist draws a picture of horses and a chariot on fire, but that's our projection as to what they're looking at. So there's a lot of stories that go back in all folklore and different histories of different countries that talk about some sort of people not human visiting us in some sort of way that might be mechanical or extra dimensional. But exactly what it is, it's going to take a while to figure that out. But I have a lot of opinions about. I had somebody in the house here that we were helping. We have lots of people that we help out and take care of and provide for occasionally, health wise, and all kinds of different things in the ministry. But they were sitting here with their children once and said, you know, if a UFO lands, you got 23 or 123 seconds to get on board. And I don't know, it was an odd number. I didn't know where they got it, and I didn't ask them. And I said, you know, everything out there in the universe is not benevolent. Be careful what you get on board with. And this is really where we start. How do you know who the good guys are and the bad guys? In real life, they don't wear white hats and black hats. And so you have to be careful what you pray for, what you think is out there. You know, evil's going, it says that, you know, evil can appear as an angel of light. So how do we arm ourselves with the full armor of God where we don't get enmeshed with evil? And then we have to ask and answer the question, what's evil? What's not evil? You know, I mean, I could go on all day on these subjects, but I'll give you, I know there were a bunch of other questions you we'll circle around.
One of the other questions I had was in your community, you know, has anyone approached you to talk about ETs or UFOs? Like Reverend Stu gets approached on average like once a month. Somebody wants to talk to him about it. Like, do you have any sort of experiences or encounters of that nature?
You know, of course, I've run across a lot of people who've come up with and said things. You know, I've traveled all over the country and talked in a lot of different places, but I usually keep them so busy with all the other lies and confusion that people have. It doesn't get to that topic very often, but this is a great opportunity to get to that topic. So we'll cover that as much as I can. I have never seen physically aliens. I've never seen, you know, like a flying saucer land. I know people who said they have seen them. And some of these people are very credible. I've read the book Incident at Exeter and lots of other books, and I find it a fascinating phenomena. But, you know, what is actually the facts and distorted perception. And when my dad was trying to get me to be a lawyer, one of the things I'd go to courts when I was a little kid with him, and people would tell you what they saw in an event, you know, an accident or whatever. And this guy would have his version, and this guy would have his version, and this guy would have his version. And a lot of people were filling in the blind spots with stuff that probably never happened. So how do they're sincere. They're trying to tell you what they think happened, but it may not be absolutely accurate. And then there's the problem, vulnerable people, our consciousness, we leak into one another a lot more than we think. You know, we're not adepts at telepathy or anything like that most of the time, most people. But the fact is the presence of other people around us thinking a certain way can influence our thinking. And we see that today in politics. Right now in America, there's this huge political battle between the supposedly what they call the left and the right, and they couldn't be farther apart, and yet people are so adamant. I mean, it's this huge division, and what's causing that division? And it's like they cannot see outside they've accepted certain ideas, and facts don't matter, nothing matters, they stick to that. And so I think it's because we influence one another more than we think. And of course, now social media with its algorithms, if you're a particular way of thinking, you'll get all your feed and social media will come along those lines. And if you're the other way, they'll come along those lines. And nobody's sitting down and actually hashing out, where can we come to agreement? Where are we in disagreement? And why are we in disagreement? And having that conversation is absolutely essential to finding the answer. There are other essential factors, but there should be no censorship in your quest for truth.
Absolutely.
In that way, social media works almost like a metaphysical principle. What you focus on, you get more of.
Yeah. And it actually is causing, supposedly things like Facebook and a lot of these things are supposed to bring us all together, and it's actually creating division because of the fact that they're censoring and feeding you stuff that they're looking for your clicks because they're making money off of advertisement and etc. They're not real. Facebook is not in a quest for truth.
That's for sure.
That's an understatement. So anyway.
Well, in a way, that's a perfect lead into my next question, and it's the $1 million question, really, and it's kind of the main mission of our show. So, Brother Gregory, in your personal opinion, if, like, as far as we're concerned, disclosure has happened. When 2017 and the U.S. government came out and talked about the Tic Tacs and said they're real, they don't know what they are. But there's a lot of people who, for whatever reason, still want an official, formal announcement. So if whether it's the U.S. president or maybe the United Nations or something like that goes on the airwaves and says, we're not alone, ET is real, what do you think that would do for the overall perspective of people's religious beliefs? Would it impact them at all, or?
Overall, I couldn't tell you because all is a lot. Some people it will affect. Like I said, Michael Knowles is a Catholic, a very religious person, very intelligent person, but he just blanketed all ETs are, if they're there, they're demons. And I already explained that doesn't make any sense. If there are demons, then there must be angels. And then, of course, we have to start defining terms like demons. We just did a study on Mark dealing with the demoniac, who is legions of demons, supposedly in a man, controlling his every actions, his every word, constantly holding them for their purpose. And Jesus casts them out, supposedly. He doesn't actually cast them out. He tells them to get out. They ask him, recognizing that Jesus is the Son, in the name of God, they're asking him. The demon is praying in the name of God. Don't cast us into the country. And of course, we explained that word country is not country. It is the place between. That's what the Greek word actually means. They don't want to be cast in the place between two realms, which is like referred to in other places as an abyss. They ask if they can go into these pigs, these swine that are on the hill at a great distance. And of course, Jesus uses a word that says he gives them license. He gives them permission to go into the pigs. And they go into the pigs, and the pigs immediately commit suicide.
Great.
We have no idea, generally speaking, when people read this stuff, but they're telling you something about spiritual reality, metaphysical reality, unless you don't want to believe it at all and just say it's all, like some people are saying Jesus didn't even exist. I believe that there's huge messages in that. I don't think they're important unless you get the primary message of love and forgiveness and sacrifice and caring about your neighbor as much as you care about yourself. If you don't get those things, you're not going to have the tools to even know what to do with the information he's giving you in that story. But demons are real. Spiritual evil is real, can control people. Most of the control is just influence. Like the Screw Tape letters I read, 67 years ago or something. He's just trying to influence people and what they do and what they think. a demonic possession takes a huge amount of energy by a demon. That's why there's not one demon there. There's a legion of demons in order to hold this man at bay. Instantaneously, when these men are gone, Jesus conscripts this guy who was running around doing crazy, crazy things, totally possessed. And he says, you go to Decapolis and teach the way and tell what the guy already knows. He's already aware. He didn't have to go. The apostles are taking years to figure out what Jesus is teaching. He's sending this guy out. He's only been depossessed for an hour or two. And he's sending him out already. How do you deal if there is, I don't know if we want to call them alien, if there is occupants that are not from Rocketdyne or some American company that has created a Tic Tac, but is actually from another source outside of the human race? How do you know if you want to get on that ship or not? How do you detect if there's a Holy Spirit in there or an evil spirit in there? How do you know? I mean, the evil is going to tell you that they're here for your good, and they're going to tell you that they're just concerned for your welfare. I mean, politicians tell you that on both sides of the aisle. And we know one of them at least is lying, if not both of them.
Yeah, right?
So why wouldn't anybody else do the same thing? Evil wants power over you. Christ came to set you free. Moses came to set you free. Abraham came to set people free. He took many souls out of Iran to set them free. And he was creating institutions whereby you could maintain that freedom, but also change you. Change the way you think. Change the way you see. Open your eyes so that you will have a defense. I've had to deal with people with demonic possession. I've had to deal with people with demonic influence in their life. And I've seen it. It's real. But I don't have any power over that. But I know where the power comes from. And it doesn't come by gobbling up people and taking their DNA without their permission, or harvesting their eggs without their permission, or grabbing some cattleman's cow and draining it of blood. If those things are happening, and they appear to be happening. I got it from the deputy. Just happens to be my grandson. So
credible as it gets, right?
Yeah. So I believe him. But anyway, how do you that doesn't sound like the angels who came and visited Abraham. They were interested. Abraham invited them in to eat. But I actually know of a case where, and I can't give you the name of the people, it was too long ago, but they were about to be abducted, and they called on the name of Jesus. Now, I don't think that works for everybody, because I don't think everybody knows who Jesus is. But the abduction stopped, and they departed. But, of course, that's a story told to me. I can't convince it, but I believe that that is something to consider. We should not believe. I know that I've listened to different people. I won't name people because they're not here, but they're well known in the circle of people who are looking into this all the time. That everybody out there is not benevolent, and everybody doesn't have your best interest at heart. And I don't even hate demons. We're supposed to love our enemy. If they're demons and they're our enemy, they have to make themselves my enemy. I'm an enemy of no man. But and that's I'll put this, and then you give me another question. But the way you cast out demons or cut off the influence of demons is not through anger or judgment or threats. It's through love. But to me, love is a utility. It's not an emotion. Music can stimulate emotion, and chemistry can stimulate emotion. Fear can stimulate emotion. One of the things and so when I talk about this, I want to emphasize the fact, one of the things that Jesus said, and I think it's probably said in the Bible one way or another about 365 times, one for every day of the year, fear not. But don't be gullible. Don't believe everything you think you know. Always question. Always be willing to have the conversation, and look into it deeper and deeper, because it goes pretty deep. So anyway,
Wise as serpents, gentle as doves.
yeah. And the serpent from the beginning was a pretty wise guy. And he used words to get his way with Eve and Adam. But of course, I'm a firm believer that the one who really screwed up there was Adam. Because when God said, "What have you done?" instead of saying, "I screwed up, Lord," he said, "The woman you gave me the apple to eat." So he just blamed it on the woman and God. And that is not a good idea. So we're going to screw up. You have to come at this from a humble heart that every one of us is wrong about something. Some of us are wrong about more things than we know, but we have to be willing to take a look at that. So if people think I'm wrong, we have an afternoon show where people can call in and tell me I'm wrong. But they better have done their homework.
Well, to go back to one of the things you said was I've heard it a bunch of times. Well, I've heard a handful of times that sometimes when people are getting abducted or about to get abducted, they will call upon Jesus, and sometimes it does. And this is anecdotal, of course, right? I'm just sort of saying what other people have said, but sometimes it does work, but it doesn't work all the time. Just sort of like you mentioned. But I just wanted to echo that because I've heard that more than once, and it allegedly sometimes it works. So that makes me wonder, what we're dealing with here. Maybe it's a mixture of things.
Well, like I said, and you can go back and play it, everybody who calls on Jesus may not really know Jesus. Like I always point out, I happen to have a neighbor named Jesus. We call him Jesus, but he's still named Jesus. He knows he's not the Jesus, but he is a Jesus. So we have in our minds this image of Jesus, and we may be wrong about it, and we need to have the conversation.
Well, I didn't want to take it too far in sort of a doctrinal direction, but I just want to mention that in the book of Acts, there is, and to your point, Mike, there's a moment where some other people use the name of Jesus to attempt to cast out a demon. It doesn't end well for them. So
Right.
There's even accounts in the Bible of it working sometimes and not working other times.
Well, even the apostles came back and reported that they could not cast out certain demons. And Jesus said to them, and they were given the power. By the way, when it says, we just covered this going through Mark, because that's one of the things that is in Mark. It's in Matthew too, in Luke. But we're up to, I think this weekend we're doing Mark 8. But he says that those the demons that they were trying to cast out only comes out with prayer and fasting. Well, that opens up another whole topic. What's prayer? What's fasting? Fasting from what? How does that translate, into what Jesus was at? I mean, they often talk about watching and praying. And that word watching, actually, they use two different Greek words in different gospels and then the epistles for it. What does that mean? Watching and praying. So these are the things we go into in greater detail. So it isn't that Jesus didn't work or the name of Jesus didn't work. It's the guy using it is not really following Jesus, which is something that we were talking about earlier. I was talking about earlier, is that it's very important that you really know the real Jesus and not just some personification of Jesus that you think you know. I mean, the character of Jesus, if you study the Bible, amazingly sacrificing himself all the time. Like he's not even getting a chance to eat. He's not getting a chance to rest. He has to go and hide to try to rest, and they still look him up, and they're touching him and hanging on him. And even the apostles, they're down to almost no food, and he takes all his food and gives it to other people. Well, the totally sacrificing nature of Christ, and they all get to eat, and he hasn't got to eat yet. And So he's telling us the mindset of a true Christian. But we got an awful lot of Christians that don't really have that mindset.
Okay, so in some of the other conversations that we've had, our guests have said things like the folks who are the most I'm probably not going to say it right, but the most religious in a way are they going to be the ones who have the most trouble with opening themselves up to this topic or being open to the idea that ET exists. So that's kind of.
I agree with you, and I'll make my first comment on that. You can rephrase that a little bit, but a lot of people that are religious, again, goes back to what I said at the beginning. Religion was not what you think about God, although what you think about God is going to enter into whatever religion you have. But religion was how you took care of the needy of society, how you feed his sheep. His sheep hear his voice, following the way. That's what Christianity was called. It was called the way. But you're right. People who find out there is something else out there, and I kind of worry about the government trying to present aliens as they're our salvation. I'm sure the Democrats are not our salvation. I'm pretty sure Donald Trump is not our salvation. I don't think aliens are our salvation. They're not going to show us how to, get free energy and all this stuff, and now we don't have any more problems. Our problem is that we don't love each other in real ways the way we're supposed to love each other. We can all get together and sing and feel good about one another and love each other, but you can't love one another sitting in a pew. You have to actually get up, roll up your sleeves, and help one another through free will offerings. That's very simple, very clear that Christ said it. Now, if people want to argue that, you're arguing with Christ, not with me, because I'm just quoting what he said. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. The Orthodox religions who think that they're Orthodox, you have to believe this and believe this. You go to most churches today, when people were asking me that we needed to write, what do they call it, doctrine for the church. Well, I thought we already had that. It's what Jesus said. So I went around and looked at of all the churches I could find. I already seen all the canon laws of the Catholic Church, but I went around and looked at all the Protestant churches. Knew a lot of people in them, and I've spoken in many Protestant churches. I have a whole history of going in there and helping them out. But I looked at their doctrines, and 80 to 90% of the words are not Christ's words. They're people's words. Now, I'm not saying they're wrong. So they're right about a lot of this stuff, but the doctrine of Jesus is the doctrine. It's the teachings of Jesus, what he said, not what we say about him. You might be right, just the same as you're looking at UFO reports. This guy might be accurate in his description, or he might not be. Do I believe in aliens? No, I believe in Jesus Christ. That's what I believe in. Do I believe there are aliens? Well, maybe. A lot of evidence. One of the greatest evidence that there are some sort of aliens, whether other dimensions or another planet or whatever, is the effort by the government to cover it up. And the black budgets. I mean, we got a lot of people thinking we never went to the moon. And I heard the best argument ever that we did go to the moon. Now, my daughter believes we did, and she's big astronomers. I mean, when she was 14 years old, they let her into the Central Oregon Astronomical Society, and then they discovered she was only 14, and the bylaws say you have to be 18. So they all met and changed the laws so that she could be in there. So, their bylaws.
Oh, wow.
But so she really knows. But the best argument is the Soviets. If they knew we were faking it, they'd have exposed us. And they were watching everything they do, and they had a lot more technology to watch what we were doing. But we didn't go up there. Now, I believe that they might have been thinking about faking it at one time, and doing some sort of cover up. But I think there's a lot of stuff that they saw when they were there that they're covering up. I mean, you can look on the photographs. Why is this section blurred out? Who did that? Well, I've watched the sun since I was 5 years old, because I knew that was one of those important things. The first time I saw the sun going through a telescope with the solar sunspots going across it. I knew this was important. And I actually stood up. I was probably 6, but it was Bobby Maloney's telescope I was looking at. I think he was only 5. But anyway, so I said, that's important. That is significant. And I still believe it's significant. And of course, we're about to go into another solar max. But, and I've written all kinds of stuff about that because it's another one of my interests. But that, and also Jesus said, look for signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. We're in this together. But why in the world are they blurring out certain parts of these planets? And they've done it with the sun. And we used to have live feed from, you could go on the internet and see a live feed through NASA of what's going on in the sun, what's going on in space, you know, SOHO and all these different satellites.
Sure
We get a live
they
feed.
still have that, don't they?
Not live. Everything's filtered. And now with everything is filtered. You don't get to see it live. You see it a little bit after the fact. And then I've seen a lot of times where all of a sudden it goes down for a while. And so something is kind of like somebody's censoring something. It's very obvious. I know guys who are quadriplegic, actually he's really a paraplegic with one good arm. And he watches the sun. I mean, like he just lives, eats and drinks it and the stuff like that. And he says that he's seen the live feed, recorded them. And then when you go back to look at the live feed, it isn't what he recorded. They've changed it. They digitally changed it. And I gave a report years ago to somebody in an article that I wrote about things, you know, one of the space programs that NASA put up that was kind of secret. We knew it was going up. It had a name and everything. And I went and looked up the data. I actually got the data feeds from this satellite that was going out there. And I reported on it just as a side note in our church newsletter. And somebody in another part of the country got a hold of me and he says, where'd you get that? I don't see that in the NASA data. And I went and looked and it was gone. Actually, some of the articles were still there. Some of the data was still there, but they weren't clickable anymore. You couldn't open them up. And I said, well, ESA has a mirror site. So it's a European space agency. So go over there. And he went over there and downloaded it. But then he called me back and he says, it's disappearing off the ESA site now. And then I went back to the NASA site. It was all gone. What? That whole, and by law, they have to share it with us because it's NASA. That's part of their charter. They have to share it because it's all government money. But they covered it all up. And then I had a guy move in next door to me out here in the desert for several years. And he was working on that project in Australia. He's an American, but he was working on that because some of the telemetry was in that project. And I asked him, because I knew all about the project. I found out he was on it. And it was one Christmas Eve, I said to him, I said, so tell me about that project. And he says, oh, I could tell you all kinds of stuff about that, but if I did, I'd have to kill you. Because he's
joking around, or
but he's sworn to secrecy on it, so it's all hush hush now. And I don't really know what all they found out, but this effort to conceal is the greatest evidence that there's something there. Exactly what there is, I don't know, because they're doing a good job of concealing it. But and actually, Eric Weinstein, probably one of the top minds in physics today. Of course, he's an atheist, so he doesn't really know everything. But, he says that is one of the greatest evidences that there is something going on. That is there because he knows people in the government that are hiding stuff and sworn to secrecy. But so that's one of the greatest evidence that there is. But what I'm concerned about is that I believe doctrinally, I mean, you guys contacted me because of my spiritual connections, is that what Jesus was telling us, and Jesus and Moses and Elijah, they're all in agreement. It's back to that meta narrative. what they were talking about. And that's what we do, is we go through each individual prophet, each individual book, and we show you what the words really mean. And it's there. But once you begin to think differently, you'll start seeing it everywhere in the Bible. And now the question is, can you, and Christ talked about this just in Mark, those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. Everybody's going to hear and see the truth, but everybody's not going to recognize it. And your quest for the truth down this path that you're going down is evidently incorporated with religion and or spirit, I should say spirituality. And I think that's a good, healthy approach. But do not be hamstringed by your doctrines. You want to always be willing to let go of your doctrines if they don't entirely agree with Christ's doctrines. And so you have to always approach this from a humble point of view. And I don't have all the answers, but I got a lot of I always say that what we really need is the right question. The right question is more important than the answer, because once you get the right question, you've answered half the problem.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, we're sort of getting close to where we're probably going to start wrapping it up. But I wanted to throw out my 2 cents on a couple of things that you were saying, with respect to the people who, for whatever reason, don't believe we went to the moon. I'm pretty confident the way that whole weird, silly idea came about was because before we went to the moon, as we would and should, we had to practice what we were going to do there.
Right.
And they went out to the desert. I don't know. I think it was the Death Valley area, but don't quote me on that. But the point is, we went out somewhere, unearthly, and practiced all this stuff. And I also heard that we also took some pictures of.
Well, we actually filmed it
just in case when they were actually doing it, it didn't come out. And they're broadcasting this on live TV. What a huge embarrassment would it be if we don't see anything. So on one hand, yeah, there's a little bit of truth to that, but on the other hand, we totally went to the moon.
I don't disagree with the fact that we went to the moon, and I listened to the argument. I even listened to the arguments about the flat Earth theory, and I don't usually argue with the people. I don't want to get into those debates. I usually just put out my arms and I says, it feels round. And that's until I go up. I have to go by hearsay and all this stuff. I will refute some of their arguments. Looking across the water, you're looking through water vapor. You're going to see things that you wouldn't normally see, and all these things. But I don't want to get caught up in those debates. I don't want to get caught up in doctrinal debates. I want to stick to the thing. And I tell you that this is part of that armor. Because if there are demonic influences out there, and of course that's what the Bible tells us, there are demonic influences, and they can come as aliens, and they might come in. It appears that there was something floating up there that the Israelites were following for years and years and years, and it glowed at night, and it looked. They called it a pillar of smoke. They didn't say it was just a cloud. They said it was a pillar of smoke, and it's sideways. That fits right into the description of a lot of what people say they see. In private talks, we have festivals out here occasionally, and people come, what we call campfire talks. I'll talk to you about all the different types of ships and the different people and the different types of demons and what they look like and all that stuff. But if I start talking about that, I'll become a new age guru or something, and we get away from the essentials. And it's the essentials that's going to change your mind and open your eyes and give you the armor of Christ. And we know, it's in the news, that there are people who want to decrease the world population, take control of our economies and our lives and our health and everything. They tell us they're going to do this. You go to the World Economic Forum, you can go to a lot of other places. I mean, I remember some of these people who talked about reducing the world's population talked in the Presidio in San Francisco. I lived in San Francisco for a while. Got a standing ovation when they talked about reducing the world's population to less than 1 billion people. No, it's not. They don't want to tell you that now. but they cheered it, and they occasionally still cheer it at places like the World Economic Forum. But our media is betraying us and all this stuff. So the reality is, there are people that are operating by hate and control and manipulation, and there are people that are operating by love, and there's a lot of people in between that. And I want to get as many of those people out of the lukewarm area into the passionate for Christ area. And I think whatever is out there will be less of a threat to us if Christ is on our side. I know this challenges a lot of things that people believe, but we want to believe in Christ and in the Spirit of God, and not in the doctrines of men. Sometimes those overlap, but sometimes they don't. And we have to always be willing to question it, and then after we've talked about it a while, we can have a group hug and forgive one another if we're wrong. But I'm going to challenge people's faith and belief. But a lot of people will be, and you could see Michael Knowles, who I have a great deal of respect for. He just wrote all alien observations or contacts or abductions off as demonic. I don't think that's, as we said at the very beginning, we've gone full circle now, that's just not accurate. But I don't think they're all benevolent. And and anybody who knows anything about anything that alive, they will want to appear, that the most evil will want to appear as benevolent. I mean, every child abduction, it's not by a guy necessarily just grabs a kid, it's a guy who seduces a kid. So that's a real threat, but I don't want anybody to be afraid. I want everybody to think differently and repent. They'll be better, informed. So anyway.
I'm definitely in agreement with your thoughts on that, because there are stories out there of accounts where people have had interactions with non-human entities and were healed or helped in some way. And I mean, there's both sides. There's people who have been harmed too. But so I totally disagree that they're all demons, or if they're demons at all.
I disagree with that too.
I just wanted to put that out there too, because our shows are separate, but they're part of a larger group. So anyone who's maybe listening to this one only, I want to make sure that idea is or knowledge is out there, that there are helpful accounts with ETs as well. So
right, and even that, but I tell you, before arms. Whatever, if there are ETs out there, whether they're interdimensional beings or from another planet, they all have spirits. You're going to have a spiritual relationship with them. You're going to have a physical relationship. But I mean, there's spirits in animals. There's spirits in people. There's spirits in aliens. They're not just robots. So the stronger we are in our spiritual understanding of the Creator, the better armed we are to deal with anybody, because even evil men will heal you, or make you better, or make you feel better, and they still may deceive you somewhere else. So you want to be fully armed. Just as we're not to fear, we are not to hate, because hate is just another form of fear. Hate is an aggressive fear. The other fear is flight. And we don't want to run from evil. We don't want to run to evil. We want to do what's right, what God wants us to do now. And I believe that everybody has that connection to that divine Creator, whether they admit it or not, but we want to cultivate it. And one of the things that blocks that is the selfish attitude, which is why Christ said we weren't to be selfish. We were to be virtuous and care for one another. So anyway, I don't know if you have any other technical questions or anything. We could have gone down the road of demonic possession. I was afraid that we were going to go there all day.
Oh no! Oh, maybe we'll do another. Maybe we'll have another conversation with you at some point, just to focus on that one. I was going to actually ask about that, but for whatever reason, it sort of got away from us.
Yeah.
But Brother Gregory, first I want to thank you for your time and being here with us, and your openness to having this conversation with us. It's my hope that that this particular episode, whether people see it or hear it or whatever, inspires other spiritual leaders around the world to start having this conversation with their own communities, or even join into our conversation. And sort of with that, what would your advice be to other spiritual leaders out there who might be tuning into this in terms of, opening up to the topic or having the conversations within their own communities?
Well, if people, spiritual leaders, whatever that means, or religious leaders, which is actually a completely different term, people want to have conversations. Why are you afraid to have conversations? You should be strong enough in your faith, even if there's flaws in your faith. And like I said, there's flaws in everybody's faith. Nobody's walking on water hardly anymore at all. So we need to have that conversation, and we should not be afraid to have that conversation, as long as people aren't, hitting you over the head with something. And but we also don't want to get distracted with too many things that take us away from those fundamental messages. So that's why I kind of snowed you with a lot of the basic fundamentals of the idea of what Christianity used to be and what it has become, because it's kind of become a watered down Christianity. I think if everybody who claimed they were a Christian were actually doing what Christ said, following the way, we wouldn't be in the problems. We wouldn't be having the problems that we're having today. And I'm not faulting anybody. And we were told there'd be a strong delusion. And it was actually, it sort of says it in the Greek, that God would send a strong delusion. Well, we can have an article up on that so we can find out why would he do that. But our eyes are darkened, but not because God wants us to live in the dark, but he wants us to why did he send the Israelites into Egypt to be in bondage? Because they had lessons to learn. Everybody you meet has a lesson to teach you. Everybody that God puts in your path, even foolish people, can teach you something. I tell young people all the time, a gray-haired old man has more wisdom in one gray hair than you have in your whole body. Well, that wisdom may not be in his brain. It may be in his history. So we have to look at the history. There's a whole history of what appears to be extraterrestrials that goes long before UFO was even a term. There's something there. Exactly what it is, don't get locked into any one thing. Always be in seeking mode. That's what Christ said. Seek, persevere, strive. And so you guys are doing it, and more power to you. And if I can be of help along the road, you just got my number. Give me a call.
All right. Will do. Reverend Stu, any final comments from you?
I just want to thank Brother Gregory for such an interesting conversation. And I've learned a few more things through this conversation. I'm very grateful.
Well,
excellent.
Where we have the hisholychurch.org website.
Yeah, I was going to ask you before you go, where can people find you?
Hisholychurch.org is a website. We have a network links on that page. We actually have dozens. We have keys of the kingdom.info that has a lot of our podcasts. You can find our podcasts by looking up Keys of the Kingdom. We're on most, Spotify, all the different ones. Some carry all the shows. Some carry like the last 30 shows. It just depends on which one you want to listen to. And you have to look up Keys of the Kingdom with Brother Gregory, because there's a lot of people out there using Keys of the Kingdom. But we're there. We also have preparingyou.com, which has a lot of the articles that goes from everything from, I won't mention the C word, but recent pandemics and history, and our Bible studies there. We have the King James Bible there, and we go through. So we put in the footnotes and show you the words that are used and how one Greek word will be translated 15 ways, and another one, another English word will come from 5 or 6 or 7 different Greek words. And so does that make a difference? Well, when you look at it, you decide. It's your journey. It's not our journey. But we're it's an individual journey. Everybody has to walk. Salvation is not a group thing. It's an individual thing, but hopefully we do it together. And so we make everything available for free at preparingyou.com, hisholychurch.org, and there's several other websites, and you can find them through those too. But yeah, and we're there.
All right. Well, thank you so
Beautiful.
much. Definitely appreciate it.
Okay. I think that you guys are doing a good job at what you're doing. I know it's new to you to some degree. I mean, this kind of form, but it seems like you're putting a real effort into it. But I really want to bring the blessings on you and your efforts, and God be with you.
All right. You
Thank you
too.
so
Thank you so
much.
much.
God bless.
All right. Have a good one. All right, Reverend Stu. I think I probably said this in the intro, but I'll say it again. I wasn't sure where that conversation was going to go, and it was pretty interesting one as we do here, right? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was very grateful for Brother Gregory's openness, and it went in some directions that I wasn't expecting. I was very pleasantly surprised, Mike. Good guest.
Yeah. It's I was also surprised, I guess, is the best word, especially when I was asking about cattle mutilations. I don't know that I was necessarily wanting to do that right off the bat, but I wasn't expecting some of those answers that we got with people that he knows or being directly involved, and that blew me away.
Yeah, I was very grateful that you asked that question, because you never know what it's going to bring out, and it brought out some real gems.
Yeah, it was a random in the moment thing. Like, I've never heard of a sheep mutilation, but maybe, right? So and then you never know. That's and Brother Gregory himself said it at the end. Like, it's if you ask the right questions. So it's
very good. Yeah, no, Linda Moulton Howe's done a bit of work on the cattle mutilations, and it's that's been a topic of interest for me too. I don't know what it is exactly. I've got some theories on it, but it's definitely worth getting information from other people.
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't know if you're willing to share at this moment, but like, what are your theories about that?
Oh man, they're all out there and strange. It's either some sort of entities feeding on these cattle, and they've got particular aspects of the cattle that they like to consume, or it's being used somehow in this hybridization process. They're the two theories that they're not my theories, but they're the two that I'm thinking might be the most relevant.
Yeah, both of which makes sense. It's such a nonsensical thing, and I don't mean that in a comedic way, but it doesn't make any sense. That when you see, I actually did see a couple photos from somebody who stumbled upon one. I think it was in Colorado a couple months ago, and they were showing me on their phone, and I was hearing about them actually walking up to it, and it was a pretty bizarre thing, and it was very disturbing photos as you might imagine, but it was quite disgusting actually too. But who's behind it and why? Big mystery.
Oh, I've seen some of those photos, and you can't unsee them.
Yeah.
Well, let's not end this one on a bad note. What can you tell me that's positive here?
Oh my gosh. Well, what's positive is going to be our next guest. And we are going to be speaking with one of the sons of the late and great Dr. J. Allen Hynek. His name is Paul Hynek. Dr. J. Allen Hynek was he was the astronomer who was contracted by the U.S. Air Force for projects Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book for the official Air Force investigations of UFOs. And we're going to ask Paul what it was like to grow up with the first ever UFO investigator and probably the most well-known in the world, and see what he has to say about that. And we might breach on a whole nother level of conversation as well, but I'm going to save that for the actual episode.
Wow, that's an amazing guest. Okay, I'm pretty sure I saw his father on Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I'm quite sure he makes a cameo in that film.
You are correct, and you did. He makes a cameo at the end, yes. So that's what's up next. So as always, thank you for your likes, subscribes, and shares. Please do keep them coming. It's the best compliment you can give us. We're putting out these great conversations for the world for free, and help other people stumble upon us. We're getting some good traction more and more every day, and we're on Universal Disclosure Podcast. We are available on YouTube and audio only everywhere.
All right. I'm loving this journey as usual, and I'm very grateful to be on this path with you, Mike.
Likewise, Stuart. Thanks so much, and we'll see you and catch up with everybody real soon.